Hello, hi, I'm Lynn Armstrong and I'm making this video for the International Conference for Educational Quality, the ICEQ, which has been held in Morocco this year. So let's talk about education for all. Now, obviously, you wouldn't be attending this conference if you weren't interested in inclusion and diversity and equal opportunities, all the buzzwords. Well, actually, I work with this in my roles. I work in Coventry University and Warwick University, and I also work with refugees and asylum seeking women, and that's in Coventry, which is UK. It's in the Midlands, Great Britain. I also work with Carriers of Hope, and this is a reflective account of that work. So I hope you enjoy it. Okay, challenges. What do you think are the challenges in your country in offering educational projects to refugees? Probably be very different to in the UK. I hope that you see that how an inclusive model of education developed and is still going on with this presentation, with this keynote. So biggest challenge, no paper, no pens, no computers, very tiny children to care for in the teaching room. English as a second language or no English at all for the students. The students are asylum seekers and refugees, and they have got meeting after meeting to do medical things or to check they're still in the country. They can't afford bus fares. They're about £4 to get into the town. They're all women that I work with, and they have a poor belief in themselves, low esteem. So part of the agenda today is talking about what's been masked about education provision. When people are displaced or labelled and judged, that's not very equal ops, obviously, but how do we get around that? Obviously, the politicians are not the only ones to blame. They make rules in the UK, such as if you haven't got the right to remain, you have no rights to education, adult education particularly, and children are charged full university fees or full college fees. So they usually are heading for very low paid jobs. So we don't just blame politicians, but we could look at ourselves, our schools, our universities, which really are supposed to be open for all. And in this keynote speech, I argue that perhaps we shouldn't blame the victims, the refugees and the asylum seekers, but we could accommodate their limitations. We could actually solve some of the problems in education by becoming more open to different ways of delivering education. Now, I'm sure most of you have read something like this. It's Freire's work, and he was saying years ago, 1968, in his book, The Pedagogy of the Oppressed, he was saying actually we need people who are oppressed to take education. So he's saying education, particularly universities, create a permanent underclass among the underprivileged and minorities in all of our cities and urban centres. And this obviously is still going on. And critical pedagogy is when we discuss what is education for? Who is it for? So critical pedagogy allows the views of the learners, inspires the learners, gives them freedom to take part in education. And the biggest part of this work that I took to heart was the banking concept. So how the teaching is viewed is filling up the learners' heads with middle class views. Education is typically taught by the middle class, and the subject content is based on the view of those educators. Would you agree? Now, this is the abstract. It's going to focus on how women use education to cope with the forced situation of being displaced as a refugee. And it considers the agency of the women, the strength of education to create new beginnings with them. Inclusion is when all learners have their education designed to suit them. And obviously, when it is designed properly, they reach praxis. Praxis is from Freire as well. So I'm going to argue the solution to poor literacy that stops you from entering university is this type of teaching. Providing information and scaffolding a small piece of work, and then assessing informally, and then teaching information literacy, very step by step, all important work before these students even enter university. So the teacher usually searches for books and refereed papers and asks for them to be read and popped into the assignments. But actually, it's much more difficult when you can't examine the papers or the screens. You're working only on your phone, or as I've seen with these ladies, they haven't got enough phone credit to get onto the internet, and their eyes glaze over on the screen trying to read the information. So that's what we're going to talk about today, is how inclusion could get around all of the things we usually use in university. How can we volunteer, make a project of it from our teaching perspectives? Obviously, education can be formal or informal, and the women learnt about the classes when they came to collect their food and their clothes. The word spread, and we had hundreds of women attending year on year, and the opportunity to join in and collaborate on the courses. And I designed the courses so that people could come in at the very baseline of English or their own language. If they didn't have childcare, which is often the problem, they could bring the baby with them. Now, we were teaching, obviously we all do, skills for life and skills for learning and skills for work. And usually with our university students, this is a matter of making your life better. Well, the women had brought different experiences to the classroom. Some have travelled through 5 countries, working as they go to get here. 1 or 2 brought their computer. Most people had a phone or could get a phone from a charity. So this allowed me to think about blended learning. There's benefits of education. I'm sure you all know these. This is from the STEM idea, that education builds resilience and it encourages experimentation. It encourages teamwork. It encourages knowledge application. Encourages technology work use, it teaches problem solving, and it encourages adaptation. Well, these very specific benefits of education can be really stretched when it comes to my work with asylum seekers and refugees. It did much more. It gave hope, obviously, and as you'll see from this presentation, it stretched whatever self-esteem they had into a more useful working model for them to go forward with their new country and their new life. The women were regularly asked what modules they liked to study. Quite often this is a counselling one. This one is one about child development. And it's really important to say, what's your experience? And so the modules weren't set, but they were like designed, co-designed, if you like. Now, paediatric first aid was supplied for creche workers, and we built a lovely pile of creche workers and care workers from these courses. Some modules actually gave a recognised certificate, and some women could take the exams, but all of the hopes for us as carriers of hope was to lead them to work if they wanted to, or to become better parents if they wanted to. But mainly we were thinking we could tackle poverty and stop the women who were used in the human trafficking and the sex work, give them an opportunity to do something different. So concepts about the law and the care are introduced again and again. There, some folks were very surprised because they don't have charities that give away things in their country. And the classroom became a place to gain loads of information about where to go for help. For example, one refuge with all the women had 3 ambulances. Every single woman called an ambulance for their sick baby. And some of them just turned up at hospital with their sick baby. They didn't realise about the care system in the UK has got 3 different levels, the primary, secondary and tertiary care. So these sessions were very good for citizenship skills as well, and knowledge. We talked about the agencies that help your children, agencies where you can go if you need something. There was a creche worker in the other room, and women could just keep the baby on their lap, or once they fed them, they could take them back to the creche. And I know the term lurking was created by digital online learning, but it can be seen in the classroom. Women sat in the room, enjoyed the company, not really knowing what was going on, but they lurked on the lesson. They were immersed in language, so their English and obviously other community languages really developed quickly. They were learning how to take some notes in any language at all and gaining auditory literacy, when you can hear, translate, write. There's a lot of steps in that, and it's something that will be useful. Here's some women translating for others in class. Not speaking English is not a barrier to attending my sessions because other women would translate and they're given the chance for conversational and words needed for work. The sessions set up a community of practice. Communities of practice are formed by people who engage in a process of collective learning in a shared domain, like a tribe learning to survive. I used academic slides that they could copy English and use 6 or 8 slides they have as the reading for the weekend. Or they could look at the references if they were at that point and look up some further reading. So changing the way to present the slides is often an inclusion method. The women teach others how to use their phones, how to get free entry to places, how to get news of work. And they also share the lessons and the videos. They find something else that they pop back onto our WhatsApp about children teething or health and illness. And actually they were building up knowledge in their own community, which connectivism is what it's called. When Downes and Siemens wrote about a new learning theory for technology, they were calling it connectivism, not connectionism, connectivism. So it's a learning theory for the digital age, and it insists that learning can be brought into class by the nodes. So some with the experience of, say, using the school can explain how the system's set up. And a node can be someone on YouTube or a teacher in another part of the world. And quite often people in the group were fantastic nodes to help others.